Let me just start off by saying that if you're pooping up your own dog's poop off the ground, try not to make eye contact with me. I don't know exactly what to do or what to say. I can't start it off with, hey, good morning, neighbor, because it's definitely not a good morning. You're cleaning shit off the ground. I don't know how good of a morning it is. Anyways, it does seem like maybe I bash pet owners a little bit too much, but it's just because they, some really weird things happen when you own pets, and I don't know, it's just kind of funny to me. I haven't owned a pet in like, it seems 20 years, but all the power to you. All jokes aside, in today's video, we are going to be talking about the Sentinel action figure again. I know if you guys are interested in hearing more about like my personal thoughts and my personal opinions on the 97 Ultimate Deluxe Marvel Legends offering, you guys can definitely check out my previous video. Like I said, I talked a little bit about some of the defining qualities and features when it comes down to the figure, and just my overall thoughts on the price and whether it's worth picking up. And as always, I can't really make anybody's choice for them, but this is just my personal opinion, my personal take. But in today's video, we're doing something a little bit different. I thought we would take a look at some of the older offerings, anything that is Sentinel related from the Hasbro universe or from the Marvel Legends universe, just so you guys can have an idea of what your options are in general. If you guys want something a little bit smaller, a little bit bigger, if you guys want something a little bit more eccentric, you guys can definitely go ahead and pick some of these up. And as always, if you guys enjoy this type of rambling nonsense content about action figures, make sure to stay tuned, because we do this pretty consistently. We've been uploading recently about 3 to 4 times on a weekly basis, and I promise this is the last time I'm talking about the Sentinel. Well, I may circle back around and talk about a few things here and there, but for the most part, this should be it. Like I said, just wanted to compare some of the previous offerings from Marvel or the Marvel Legends or Hasbro line in general. And the first one that I wanted to look at was, well, the more obvious one, which is the Hasbro Sentinel Marvel Legends action figure that was released a couple of years ago. And I have to say, look, the quality is definitely different with the animated version. I said this in the previous video. It's kind of sleek, it's slender, it's kind of more round and circular. I don't know if that makes any sense. There's not as much sculpted detail with this particular figure, but again, it is accurate to the source material. Like, that's what it looks like in the animated series. It is a little bit bland, it's round, it doesn't have a lot of texture to it, at least from what I can remember in the animated series. So it makes perfect sense that the action figure would follow suit. So if that's something that really bothers you, I guess you can just kind of not pick it up, and if you're not a big fan of the source material. But in terms of just length and size, it really isn't that much of a difference. I think the original one did have, like I said, more sculpt to it, more detail, and it is, I believe, like 4 inches taller and then maybe like a couple of inches wider. It does come with the tentacles, and if I'm not mistaken, some light up features, and then a couple of extra bonus tier level action figures. However, you're paying for it. I mean, the original price point for this one was about $350, and it was there, you know what I mean? Like, the value technically was there, but you were paying for it. It wasn't like they were just throwing in extra accessories and extra things. Like, it was a pretty expensive figure right out the gate. Now, if you want to do the math, if you want to sit down and like try to crunch it, I guess if you took away some of the features, like the light up features, if you took away the 2 extra figures, if you took away the tentacles, things of that nature, you could get it down to, I think, like in my mind, it would be like $250 maybe. So that's kind of what you're paying for if you didn't have all the extra little bonuses. And so $250 to $175, the price scale or the price point definitely makes sense for me. You're getting a little bit more with the Hasbro Sentinel, and so again, that's really just what it boils down to. If you wanted the more eccentric look, if you wanted a little bit more sculpted detail and things of that nature, you would go for the Hasbro Sentinel. Not to mention, it's kind of just it's not too like source specific. You can kind of look at it and be like, oh, that's an X-Men Sentinel. It's not really accurate to one particular appearance in the comic books, or maybe it was, but it was kind of like more in general, like it would fit into more displays, whereas in the 97, obviously it looks like from the animated series. Granted, I don't think that you necessarily have to have an animated series display for this Sentinel. I think it fits into multiple different displays, and I do feel like it does look somewhat accurate to some comic book representations, so it's not like the end of the world. But again, It's just different styles. I will say, if you're interested in picking up the Sentinel now, the HasLab version, you're paying about $700 brand new with everything in box. I did see some offerings at like low 600s if they took off some of like the bonus tier action figures. So it's really up to you. If you don't want the extras, you can end up paying about like 600. If you want everything included, it's roughly about like low 700s to even up to $800. So it's quite expensive, but you have to consider a lot of the people that bought it back then, a lot of them were army building, and then some of them probably are just looking to resell them. So that's one of your options, I suppose, if you're interested. But like I said, in terms of value or in terms of just overall like sculpt and detail, the old HasLab definitely had a little bit more to offer, but it was definitely a higher price point. And even though the next figure isn't technically a Sentinel action figure, I still thought that we would check in on the Hasbro Galactus Marvel Legends action figure, which is really interesting. I don't know why the market is working itself out this particular way, but the Galactus is actually about $100 cheaper. If you want a brand new one, you can find some for about $600 with shipping and taxes included. If you want some that are opened without the extra tier levels, you may be able to even find it cheaper than that, like maybe mid 500s around there. It's crazy to think that the Sentinel is on average a little bit pricier, and I'm assuming because of the army building capabilities for the Sentinel, and potentially that you know, everybody that bought multiples actually, you know, kept them, are displaying them, whereas in the Galactus it's essentially one character. You either buy one or you don't buy one at all. It's also worth mentioning the Galactus was at a much higher price point. If I'm not mistaken, it was $450, somewhere along those lines. It did have some electronic features and I think some light up features and things of that nature. It also came with like 3 different tier level action figures, so there were definitely way more offerings for this particular HasLab than the Sentinel. But again, the market has spoken. They value the Sentinel way more than the Galactus action figure for some unknown reason. And if for any reason you don't want to shell out the $600 for a Galactus HasLab figure, you can always look up the old school Marvel Legends Toy Biz Build-A-Figure, which I believe now goes for roughly about $200. But again, it's going to be like a really outdated body sculpt, really outdated articulation and overall technology. But if you don't want to purchase a gigantic Galactus and you just don't have the room for it, you can always have that as an option. Again, not really a Sentinel, but I still thought that we would take a quick little look at it and see how it is doing in the on the third-party market. But going back to the Hasbro release Sentinel Marvel Legends action figures, we also have the Days of Future Past deluxe box set that included the Wolverine, and I believe this one also has some light up features. It's definitely a much smaller rendition than some of the HasLabs, and including the 97 animated series Sentinel. If I remember correctly, this was roughly about 16 inches tall, and very similarly to the HasLab version, this one doesn't really seem to be accurate to any one specific source material. Like, I could easily see this Sentinel in multiple different displays, whereas in the animated 97 version, it looks like it, you know, comes from the animated show. Now, the prices range when it comes down to this particular figure. I've seen it for as low as like high 200s, like almost 300, all the way up to 450 brand new. And then used, or the box being in damaged condition, usually drops the price, you know, by quite a bit. Like, you can see some of these open and used, maybe even without the Wolverine, for about $200 or high 100s. There was a seller selling 2 of these opened, you know, with no box, no packaging included, and they were only asking for a little bit over $200. So this one definitely seems a little bit more feasible to be able to army build with it. Again, if you're looking for one that is open, like for example that 2-pack, you'll roughly be paying a little bit over $100, maybe like $120 per Sentinel, which really isn't that bad if you sit down and do the math. This is a really good alternative if you're looking, like I said, for a Sentinel that kind of fits multiple different eras, multiple different displays. I think this one fits perfectly. And if you're looking for some really cool box art, if you decide to pick this one brand new, I think it'll definitely be a really cool display piece or a really cool backdrop as well. And if you really want to scrape the bottom of the barrel, there is also a Toy Biz Sentinel Build-A-Figure that was released, I don't know, it seems like 20 years ago. It could be a little bit longer, a little bit shorter, but yeah, it seems about 20 years ago they decided to release their own Sentinel. Granted, as I said previously with the Galactus from Toy Biz, it's going to be old, outdated, the articulation is really bad, the sculpt isn't all that great, but it's another option out there. I believe I've seen them for as low as like 150 to 200. Be wary though with this particular collectible, because as it's becoming a trend in the collector community, there's already a knockoff of this Sentinel. So there's, you know, they're probably getting shipped overseas from China, and it's going to be very difficult to buy it online. I would prefer to pick up the Days of Future Past if you're looking for that like $150 to $200 range. I would much rather get that one than the Toy Biz version, just because of those knockoffs being manufactured overseas. Not to mention, even if you got the original one, I find it hard to believe that it's not going to have at least a little bit of wear and tear. And then in terms of probably, if I'm not mistaken, the newest iteration of the Sentinel in the Marvel Universe, we did receive that 2-pack SDCC 2024 event exclusive figure, which really didn't end up being exclusive. It was also sold on the Hasbro Pulse website. It came in a 2-pack, and if I'm not mistaken, it was actually pretty accessible, pretty readily available for at least a couple of hours, and it was also very affordable. I think the retail for this was like $54.99. Granted, it's definitely not as big as we're used to, because this is based on their video game appearances. They were just about like a little over 7 inches tall, so they were definitely bigger than your prototypical normal Marvel Legends action figure. A lot of people thought it was going to be a retool of that Iron Man. It turned out that it wasn't. The newer Iron Man body mold is just slightly shorter. If anything, it was re-engineered, like maybe they ported on some new legs and limbs to make it a little bit longer and taller. Regardless, this is a great option if you're looking for just some random Sentinels in your display. It also came with some extra accessories. They were you know, very well articulated, and again, newer technology, newer paint applications, and obviously the new engineering that goes with these type of releases. So if you're looking for something that is just going to be there, not necessarily be big and gargantuan and imposing, and also if you don't really have a lot of shelf space, this is a perfect alternative. And if you actually want to utilize them with like your 3 3/4 inch Marvel Legends, I think that would even fit better. They would look big and have a lot of presence, you know, next to the smaller Marvel Legends line. Although I will say, I can't even remember the last time that I saw a release of the 3 3/4 inch Marvel Legends action figure. That line might actually be dead. And speaking about the Marvel Legends 4-inch line, let's not forget there's actually a retro line out there, and Hasbro did decide to release their Sentinel, which is, I believe, is like about 8 inches big. It comes in that beautiful retro card. Granted, it comes with absolutely no articulation. I think it has like maybe 5 points of articulation, but that's the whole point of the retro line. But I have seen some people kind of throwing a wash on there, maybe a customized head sculpt, and then just having them kind of as like background Sentinels or background action figures, or you can throw them into your 3 3/4 Marvel Legends display. Like I said, I don't really see too many of those nowadays, but it's still a possibility, and I think those display better with those particular, or with that particular scale. Now, it's worth mentioning, most Sentinels aren't really going to do much, so if you just want them like in an upright position, these are absolutely perfect. And just to reiterate, they're roughly about like a little over 8 inches. What's crazy is I do remember seeing this particular figure, like this exact figure, at my local Ross for like $3 to $4, I think, somewhere along those lines. The retro card was pretty beaten up, and I think the actual blister was a little bit, the plastic blister was like really warped, but it was cool if you wanted to pick it up for your display. I mean, personally, I would probably just buy it like mint on card and hang it on my wall, but it actually did sell pretty quickly, because I do remember seeing it at multiple different discount stores and then immediately selling out within the next couple of days. But as I said, it's an option. You're looking at roughly about like $23 to $25 with shipping included. So as I said, it's just one other option. And then finally, the last Sentinel that we're going to be talking about has to be the Masterworks Sentinel action figure from way back in the day. This was released in 2010, I believe. And similar to some of the previous Sentinels, this was made for the 3 3/4 inch scale. It's roughly about 16 inches tall. It does have some electronic components to it, and I will say this one fits in absolutely perfectly with the 3 3/4 inch scale, but it also works with your Marvel Legends display. I guess it depends on how big you want your Sentinel to be, but in my personal opinion, if you're looking for something big, for something beefy and also affordable, this may be your best option, because I've seen some of these opened and used like in relatively good condition going for just a little over $100. So let's say you want to purchase a couple of these, you should be spending about maybe $200. That's not really that bad. Now obviously this is 2010, it's almost 15 years old. The technology isn't there, the articulation, a lot of the components that probably were there when you originally purchased it brand new from retail probably have worn down a little bit. Maybe the joints, some articulation maybe is a little bit loose. So it's really up to you as a collector to see if this is worth it. But like I said, in terms of value, I think this one is probably up there. It displays incredibly well. I have seen a lot of people do their custom paint work on this, because it doesn't really it doesn't really resonate too much with them, so they prefer like that teal and purple and pink color scheme. So I have seen a lot of people repaint these. But there you have it. These are all the Sentinels, at least that I can think of, that have been released from Hasbro, and I guess it's a matter of personal perspective which Sentinel is better. I guess only time will tell once we get that X-Men 97 Sentinel in hand and really get to articulate it and play around with it, then we'll get a better idea of it. But just on the surface, to me, the 97 animated Sentinel has so much value. It has really good size, really good proportions. On top of that, you're only paying $175. A lot of these other Sentinels that are close to that size, like even the 16-inch Masterworks and the Days of Future Past, which I believe are both about the same size, there's great value there. You can probably pick them up for, you know, used for relatively close to what the 97 Sentinel is going to go for. But again, the Sentinel that you're going to get it from the 97 series is brand new. It's in package. Whereas in the other ones, you're really taking a risk by buying used figures, or some of them that maybe the packaging isn't in great condition and you can't display it in packaging, or however the case may be. Same thing with the HasLab offerings. Not only is that one a little bit bigger and is going to take up more room and more space, but also not everybody has an extra $500 to just lay down on a figure. I think $200 is definitely affordable, which is, you know, about what it's going to cost you. And so just in my humble personal opinion, it seems like that X-Men 97 may be essentially the best Sentinel. Not necessarily that it's the best, you know, in function or in paint or in detail, just in value maybe. I don't know. I guess, like I said, once we get the figure in hand, we'll get a clear picture of how the figure is going to display and articulate. But as always, this is my personal opinion, my personal take. This is kind of more of just a research, just kind of throwing it out there to you guys and letting you guys explore it yourselves. Let me know your thoughts down below. Am I right? Am I wrong? Do you have any of these? Let me know in the comment section. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, if you guys enjoy this type of rambling, make sure to stay tuned. We do upload pretty consistently. Stay safe out there, and as always, make sure to enjoy the hobby. That's the most important part of all this. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.